Greetings, salutations, respect, and love, all you freaks out in the progdom. We've got a special, we got a special episode today. The great and mighty Ice Age is joining us. I've got Doug Odell and I've got Jimmy Pappas. Is it Pappas? Pappas, how do you say it, Jimmy?
You said
Either
it right.
one would work.
All righty. Doug is the bass player. Jimmy is the guitar player. And producer, I guess. I know you produced the early stuff.
Yes.
Did you produce this new one, Jimmy?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yes, Josh and I produced a new one. Yes.
All right. So for some of these people that are watching this may not have a clue. It's been a little while since you guys were a thing. So if you, either one of you guys, if you want to just give me a little brief history about the band and how it was that you came back from the dead after all this time, I'm really curious to hear that timeline.
Doug, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. So what happened was we stayed in touch as friends, and I think there was always an unspoken thing between us that there was unfinished business for Ice Age, creatively speaking. Hal, our drummer, put together a get-together at his house in 2015. And, it was going to be a family thing, all of us getting together, bringing kids, significant others. And he also said, guys, bring your instruments.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, like what the hell? Although one thing I could say is we're not casual musicians, and I feel like the idea of, hey, let's jam, I leave that to the casual musicians out there in the universe, and all love and respect to them.
Yeah.
But I'm not a jammer.
No.
Right? That's not my thing. If we're going to get together and play music, we have to have a serious agenda. And I think I speak for the rest of the guys in the band in saying that that's also the way they operate. So it wasn't instantly like, oh yeah, let's do this. There was maybe, I think all of us had some reluctance, but then Hal talked us into it, and we showed up with instruments. And at one point within the festivities, the four of us got in a room, and immediately there was just that magic, that chemistry that only exists when you put these guys, and when I say these guys, I'm talking about the core three, Josh, Jimmy, and Hal, because they've been together. I still call myself the new guy, even though I'm the new guy 20 years later.
Yeah.
But when you put them in a room, and especially like when Jimmy picks up a guitar, he won't start playing somebody else's riff.
Right.
The only things that come from his fingers on that instrument is something new and something original and something that sounds like Jimmy and sounds like Ice Age. And that's what happened. Immediately, he started playing something. We reacted to it. We joined in, and it was like, wait a minute, like there's something here. And what went from that casual jam, became, all right, well, like now what? Like we need to get in a room. And we need to start working. And that led to us writing a couple of the prog epics that are on this new album, Waves of Loss and Power. So Perpetual Child Part 2, it was one of the first things that the seeds of happened that day. And also To Say Goodbye, which is the continuation of that suite.
What a triumph. What a triumph, by the way. Unbelievable way to end the album. That two-part To Say Goodbye suite, just incredible. But I'm just wondering, what were you guys doing in the interim? I mean, those two albums and the EP you put out and then the Soul Fracture stuff, obviously you had music running through your veins. I mean, a day job can't give you the same kind of satisfaction, can it?
Well, I can't speak for Doug, but for me, when we decided to put a pause on the music part, for me it was literally a pause.
Yeah.
In 2006, I put my guitar up on the wall, and it stayed up on the wall till 2015 until Hal called.
Well, yeah, I read Scott Medina and Sonic Perspectives said that you didn't pick up a guitar for 10 years.
Yes. It was literally like, I did listen to music, and I did listen to a lot of different music, but I did not. That doesn't mean that I wasn't creative. I've been creative for all my life, and I did a different thing. I've always been a graphic designer, and I've done that throughout my 30
So
year
you had
career.
A creative outlet.
So it was creative, but it was in a different vein.
Yeah.
And I did it that way, and that filled my creative needs.
Absolutely.
And I stayed away from music for that long.
Well, some people gotta get into graphic design to get their creative urges. Other people start a YouTube channel.
Right, exactly. Whatever is creative, right? Exactly.
Whatever works for you.
That's all for me, right? It's not that I did some type of mundane job or I would have to do some repetitive thing. It was very creative, and it was actually really good because come 2015 and the results that you see now is part of me, like staying away for all those years and listening to other types of music and looking at things from a different perspective creatively, and then all that energy and all that input that I had for all those years showed up in the new album. Yeah, because it was just something.
I definitely hear a progression from Little Birds to this new one. And clearly, the stuff you're listening to, the stuff you're inputting into your brain is going to impact the material that you're writing. What were some of the things you were listening to, man? Because I don't know how you did it, but this new album is at the same time heavier than your first two albums, yet more accessible. I mean, how do you do that at the same time? It's crazy. What were you listening to? What kind of music were you listening to?
I would listen to anything I can get my hands on, but mostly from a progressive perspective, I listened to a lot of Tool.
Okay.
I went into a lot of Tool, but from a musical perspective, I went back to my roots, something that I had forgotten over the years, right? I went back and listened to my 70s albums.
Yeah.
I listened to like early Thin Lizzy. I listened to like early Purple, early like Led Zeppelin. And I was like, what did make, remember the first time you heard like a Led Zeppelin song, you were like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah.
And I would listen to that back and I go, oh my God, I'm getting that feeling again. And I had to stop and think, what made that song and that band so unique and so huge in my life? And I was like, and I started dissecting those, without having any need to play it or anything. I just started thinking about it from a songwriting perspective. That had a lot of influence into it.
Definitely.
And I progressed through the years. I went through the 70s, then I went a little bit into the 80s, and I started going back to my roots again. That's what brought up a little bit of that.
You can hear it. I mean, obviously you guys have been tagged with the progressive metal label, which I guess is accurate. I mean, I definitely hear Dream Theater and Symphony X and Fate's Warning, Queensryche, all that stuff. But, honestly, I hear more of the classic rock influences. Even when you're squealing away on your guitar, I'm still not, it's not Dream Theater. It's an entirely different thing. And I dig what you guys do, how you're able to marry those 70s influences with the progressive and power metal of the 90s. What were you guys trying to accomplish with this third album? I mean, the first two were on Magna Carta, which at the time was kind of a big deal, right? You guys got signed. You were probably, popping the champagne and like thinking you guys are going to be the next big superstars. And now you're stuck with Ken Golden, man. How's the transition to Sensory been working?
Well, I could tell you that the best part about this process for the writing of this album is there was no agenda.
Yeah.
Was no marketing plan. There was no pressure of, we have to do this or we have to be something specific. It was actually selfish and pure in that we followed Jimmy's lead and we followed Josh's lead because they are the primary songwriters and the primary architects of whatever happens arrangement-wise and riffs-wise and progressions-wise. And, Hal and I will come in with our, reacting to it, but ultimately, they're the songwriters. So we followed their lead. And, there was definitely an unspoken sense of getting back to the roots of what Ice Age is authentically, which connects to those first two albums.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's such a wide range of musical influences. All of us in this band are music junkies, we're music fans, we're music collectors. And there's, Josh, has, a whole classical music side of him, which you see comes out at times.
You hear it in his keyboard playing.
But
Some of
then
those arpeggios are real Rachmaninoff-y.
But there's also a side of him where he might be one of the heaviest music fans in the band. Like, he's really, he went through a phase where he was into really heavy stuff. And he's like, as far as he's concerned, like the first 4 Black Sabbath albums, are like, that's
the Torah. That's that's the Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus.
Exactly.
I've got Paranoid, Master Reality in Volume 4.
and who could disagree with that?
I can't.
Yeah,
Me neither.
No.
It's and so, but there's even beyond heavy music, all of us, have a very wide berth of what we listen to and what we've been influenced by and what we've been exposed to. And all of that comes into play when you hear this new record.
It does. And I talk to artists all the time and they're like, oh, I'm influenced by this, Joe Blow and Jack Black and Johnny whatever. And then you listen to the album and like, I don't hear nothing like that at all, man. All I'm hearing is, something else entirely. So it's really nice to hear a band talk about their influences and then put the record on and actually be able to hear that stuff. I hear Saga, Kansas, Styx, as well as all the, the heavier stuff that we talked about earlier. And that's what's exciting to me. I've been really, really happy with this new album. How long did it take to lay down the basic tracks on this?
Well, the recording process was not that long. It was hindered by COVID. We did it during COVID. Yeah. So some of the writing was done over the internet. The fine tuning was done over the internet. So we used a piece of software called Jamulus, and we would get online, Hal an electronic kit, me through my system here, going through online, and we would just kind of like write in that respect and finalize things in that respect, which is kind of weird for us because we always did this live in the album, like we in the studio. We're always like ended up in our studio because we used to have our own recording studio. So we would be there, we write, we get on our instruments and we record. But now it was over the internet. It was kind of weird. And then tracking happened like individually.
Right.
And like Doug would come to my studio here and we do the track in here, and I did my track in here, and then Josh did a little bit of track in here for a couple of songs. But then I set up a studio for him on his end and helped him set it up on his end so he doesn't have to because we live far away from each other. So he did a lot of the recording on his own, and he would send me the tracks, and I would just do a lot of the engineering here as well. And then we went into like a recording studio and we did the drums for Hal. So it was kind of like a piecemeal thing. And we had to because it was COVID in the middle of all this, and it was kind of, different.
I had a feeling that it was probably done remotely, given the time frame we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But honestly, that seems to be kind of the modus operandi for a lot of bands now. Yeah. Studio time is super expensive. And let's face it, you can build your own home studio for a lot less than you could back in the 70s. So I had a feeling it was done that way, but I got to say, it doesn't sound like it was done that way. I can tell a lot of times when it's remote and you're leaning into that click track so heavy that it just feels a little clumsy and off, and there's nothing you can do because you're a slave to that click track. I'm not detecting any of those problems on this album, man.
Yeah, no, it was done. Yeah, you definitely don't hear that. And we do that a lot for us. Most of the band is really a live band.
Yeah.
This is how we were born. We're always in the studio playing together. And when we had our own recording studio, we would have a real 16-track, real machine, and then we'd get behind our instruments, and then a new riff came about, and someone started playing, we hit the record. Hey, here it is. That's and right. It would go down. And we try to do it the same way here. We try to, when someone played something, if it was like, if it felt natural for him to slow down or speed up or do something,
Yeah.
we did not bother with that. We didn't go back into the studio and say, you know something, move this here, move this there, do this here. We didn't do any of that. He said, you know, if it felt like it was going a little faster, that's where the song took us. That's what it is. And try to get that live feel in there a little bit.
I love it. And it's obvious the energy level is so high as a result. A lot of times you get real, clinical, and it gets sterile and it gets a little antiseptic.
Yeah.
But this is just, it's got power, it's got passion, but it's got great chops and really good songwriting, man. I was going through the lyric sheet earlier today. It's really well written stuff. I'm assuming that's Josh writing all the lyrics.
Yeah, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 100% Josh on the lyrics. And
wow.
He not only is he an incredible singer and virtuoso keyboard player, and that you've got Jimmy, who's an amazing guitarist. Hal can play anything, and
I remember when the first album came out, when The Great Divide came out, I remember hearing people calling Hal the new Neil Peart. I'm like, I got to hear this band then.
He
really got me going. That's why I bought The Great Divide, was people talking about Hal's drumming.
Yeah, I mean, he would love to hear that, because he's a huge devotee, and we all love Rush. But right? I mean, if you have taste. But the thing is, the thing that we love about Hal, and we all say this, and we've said this in different ways, is that no matter how technical some of his playing can be, he grooves like nobody.
Yeah.
He is just like, he is a master of groove. And it's that brings such life to the music, and like Jimmy said, such a live feel, and it doesn't have that super, like you said, antiseptic, kind of over the top prog feel, because there's pocket there, and there is movement, and sometimes it is faster, sometimes it is slower, and we just roll with it.
Well, he's got a real tight pocket, but the thing I really enjoy is, much like the Professor Neil, Hal he's a musician. You can tell he's actually playing inventive stuff. There's stuff going on his drum fills and whatnot that are actually memorable and actually stick in your brain. When you can have a drum hook, you got yourself a good drummer, man. For sure. He
plays and writes to the music, which is something you cannot teach. You can teach technique. You can get a little 10-year-old or 12-year-old to play the most complicated drum riff of all time.
We've seen them littered with those videos.
Yes, and you can't teach someone how to play and write music. Yeah. That's the hard thing. You have to take time and ear and development, and he has that like if people were in the same room and would write songs, they will be in awe of what, like, I will play some kind of weird riff in 7/8, which is really like bizarre, and then he would stop playing to it, and you can dance to it at the end. It's like, oh my God, like it doesn't even sound like a 7/8 riff.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, what are you doing here? And then on top of that is you working on it over and over again, because that's what we used to do. We'd come in and I would just play it. He said to me, keep playing it. And then he would stop adding like musical riffs and musical stuff to it.
Yeah, that expands it kind of reminds me of when Steve Vai talking about playing with Zappa and his audition. Okay, I want you to play in 15/8 time in the style of Muddy Waters, but I want you to play a reggae song. And then halfway through, he's like, I don't make it in 11/8 instead. And it's just like, there's certain guys that would be a problem for, and others that just find a way to make it musical at the same time.
That's it.
And we're prog people here, so 7/8 time, man, that might as well just be 4/4 to us. I mean, for sure. But you talked about you guys being like kind of a live first band. So what's with any potential live dates?
So right now we are opening Prog Power USA.
Oh, you are? In
September.
Nice.
In Atlanta. And it's the first time Ice Age is doing that particular festival. And, that's the band's return to the stage. Yeah.
How long has it been since you guys have graced the stage?
2004? Was that?
I think 2005 might have been
2005
the last time we played.
Right.
So Soul Fracture never did any live. dates?
No, we did. We actually did a lot. We
Okay.
did a lot. And we wrote a ton of material during that time. But as Ice Age, like to be accurate, it's been 19 years since Ice Age played live.
Oh, this is gonna be a good time. Gonna be a good show. Now, are you guys familiar with the punk rock band from Denmark named Ice Age?
We are, yeah. Well, when you say punk rock band, there's an all-female metal band.
Oh,
Called
I don't know
Ice.
them.
Yeah. And actually, Josh, I mean, the other guys know this story better than me, but I've heard it so many times. There was contact between the bands, and they basically gave Ice Age their blessing, in order to use it. Now, there's another band that's a newer band out that is Ice Age with no space between the words.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to. They're on Matador Records and Mexican Summer, but they're a cool band too, man. I really like them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're in good company.
That's right. That's right.
But you were talking about like the prog metal label, and what I thought was worth saying is that, and we've talked about this too, that someone had referred to Ice Age once as heavy prog.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great descriptor, because we're not just prog rock and we're not really just prog metal. There is so much more in there.
Yeah, I think heavy prog is probably an excellent label. If you got to label it, and why not? I love labeling stuff. I love labels. They're always so accurate and helpful. But
yeah, I mean, that's what we are.
What were your thoughts with the continuation of the Perpetual Child and to say goodbye? Was that just like something that was organic, or was that something you thought of, how can we get some of those old fans from the first two albums from way back in the 1990s and the early aughts back into the game, or was it just something that the writing took you there?
It was the beginning of it was just happened. And that's one of the riffs I started playing the first time we got together and to rehearse. And we got into the studio and I started playing this riff, and it just happened to the intro riff. It just happened to be like that. It was in 5/4. And as I'm playing it, Hal says, "Oh, that sounds familiar." And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just playing something." And then he goes, and then as he kept saying it, I kept playing it. We wrote it. I went home. I started thinking about it. Oh, wow, that sounds close to like Perpetual Child.
Yeah.
So from that point, subconsciously I started writing parts to it, thinking in that mode musically.
I think it's smart. I mean, why not?
They're not the same parts at all. They're not, but it's the same. If you look at the two songs, the structure is similar.
Yeah, I played them back to back yesterday. I was trying to find musical threads that kind of connected it. I didn't really hear a whole lot, but you're right. The overall structure and the overall atmospheric of the song, I guess.
And the atmosphere and the feel, if you hear about it, it starts with a riff. It goes into a bit of a heavier part. There is a guitar solo in it. And then after the guitar solo, you go into like a mellow verse, and then you go to like a slightly heavier verse, and then you go into a chorus. The structure is kind of like built the same way so that it flows in that respect.
Yeah. The structure was the one thing I detected there. But man, I gotta say, this new album, Waves of Loss and Power, the first two songs, man, you want to make sure that you're grabbing people's attention right from the rip. And the Needles, Eye and River Flow, come on, man. That might be the best 1-2 punch I've heard all year. It definitely got me, right into the album. And then you get into the meatier stuff, the longer tracks and whatnot. But you can't get there without those first two tracks. And I got to say, Doug's bass playing on River Flow, you play some really cool creative stuff on that track. Yeah. And really thumbs up on that, Doug.
Yes.
Thanks, man. I got to tell you, the first time I heard those parts, and Josh led the charge on a lot of those parts that we then worked around. It was interesting and challenging because writing it on piano and it all being very flat key centric taking that and translating it to the fretboard was a little bit of a nightmare, but like in retrospect, it was a wonderful challenge.
Yeah, that's why I never want to play with wind players in a band. They always want to be in like E flat and stuff like, come on, man. I'm a guitar player. Right. I don't want all those flat keys.
But when I heard those riffs, and I can't help but notice the beautiful Kansas album behind you, and I love Kansas.
Oh yeah.
And Josh is a huge Kansas fan too. We absolutely love them. I heard that main riff, and it had that essence of that kind of powerful Kansas single note unison riff.
Yeah,
it was so hooky and so catchy. And then when the way that Jimmy's guitar parts weave around the keyboard parts, and that's another amazing thing about that makes Ice Age so special, is that in a lot of prog bands where you've got guitar and keyboards, there's a lot of fighting for real estate.
Yeah, there is.
Like, here comes the guitar solo, here comes the keyboard solo, here comes the unison, here comes the harmony. But the thing is, whereas Josh and Jimmy can do all of that, and they do it amazingly, but when they write together and when something is guitar centric, Josh finds the perfect keyboard parts to complement what Jimmy's doing.
Not just the perfect parts, Doug, the perfect patches. Because there's something like, you listen to Jordan Rudess and Petrucci when they're doing their unison things. It's so important because Petrucci's got one sound. His guitar is not really sounding any different ever, but it's incumbent upon that keyboard player to find just the right patch. And Josh, man, the way Jimmy's guitar and Josh's keyboards like snake, even when they're doing unison stuff, it just sounds so cool. Awesome stuff, man. I am so impressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, those guitar parts that Jimmy wrote around the keyboard stuff, in that song, it's like it just couldn't be more perfect. Like no one could come up with something that fits any better. And then and then the way Hal grooves. So I mean, like they just, they made it too easy for me.
Yeah.
To come into that song and find my spots, in order to.
Well, yeah, you're doing more than just following Josh's left hand.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
I follow his left hand when it's appropriate, and because he happens to write great left-hand part.
Yeah.
He's
You'd be foolish not to use some of that.
Yeah, I mean, my first instrument was piano, and I used to love playing that Van Halen keyboard stuff because it had that heavy left hand going.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there was definitely the other thing that's amazing about working with these guys is there's no egos and there's no power struggles. Hal comes in and Hal writes his parts and he'll get suggestions, but ultimately he has the freedom to write his drum parts, as long as they fit and they don't step on anything. And same thing with me. I have the freedom to write my parts. And, because Jimmy and Josh have such an amazing grasp of theory on a much higher level than I do, if something is clashing or if something is stepping, they can always, say, hey, there's a note there that's not quite right, or, I see what you're going for, but try something else. And we just keep experimenting until, we find what works, and then we lock it in.
There's nothing more important to a band than the humble bass player.
The bass playing in this album is spectacular.
It's great. It's great.
And it's not a matter of doing this all the time. It's just
I'm not hearing anything super technical out of Doug.
Because
I'm just hearing
it's there.
Crazy.
I mean, when he has to, like, there's a certain part in the needle that Doug and I are playing together, and they're really fast stuff, and but the good stuff. I mean, if you listen to River Flow, there's the guitar lead in the middle of River Flow, which is a very moving, slow and emotional lead. And if you hear what is playing behind it, it's just brilliant.
Oh,
It's just that groove and heaviness that comes from the bass.
I agree. Those first two tracks, Doug kind of steals the show, which is great. I also love how on the first track, The Needle's Eye, the very first solo you get on the album isn't a guitar solo. Thank you so much. Oh, man, I appreciated that so much. When Josh rips that solo in Needle's Eye, I'm like, these guys have figured it out.
Yeah.
I remember thinking when he started doing the Hammond stuff, I remember wondering, like, is this going to work like a Hammond?
Yeah.
A Hammond solo when like musically it's so heavy.
Yeah, it's not calling for Hammond at all.
But like when you hear it, it's so nasty and it's so greasy, and it's got like that John Lord.
Yeah, man, you know it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's just so nasty. Like I couldn't imagine any other keyboard sound there.
Yeah. And that's the key. I mean, we know he's a great player, but it's the sounds that he's choosing as much as the notes he's selecting. Today was a big day in music, right? We've only got a couple minutes left. So I just want to get your thoughts on something. I live in Ohio, so I'm kind of obsessed with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for some obnoxious reason. And we just got our inductees announced this morning. Did you hear this?
I only heard about one that was confirmed.
I want to get your thoughts on the inductees here. Chaka Khan.
I mean, I love Chaka Khan. I saw her live with Prince in 2000.
Sweet.
She's amazing. She's an amazing drummer. She's a legend.
Kate Bush made it.
I mean, Kate Bush, probably didn't get nearly as much attention in her heyday as like the resurgence because of Stranger Things. And it's amazing. It's like, that song has given her like a second lease on life career-wise.
Absolutely. Sheryl Crow made it.
I mean, I don't have anything against Sheryl Crow, but I don't have anything like, I mean, is she talented? Yes. Do I consider myself a fan? I'm not a fan. Here's what I'll say. I think that there are other artists that haven't been inducted that have been around longer.
Oh, yeah.
That, it's a shame that they're not in already.
Yeah, I got my Hall of Fame snubs list right here, and it's led by Iron Maiden, but that's a whole other.
I mean, come on, that's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Come on, man. They've sold 200 million copies. They've got 19 albums out. Don't get me started on Maiden.
That is not like, this is one of those. They're one of those bands that span like language, countries, cultures, like everywhere in the world you could find Iron Maiden.
Oh yeah,
and some
incredible
obscure spot somewhere, right?
Missy Elliott got in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I actually met her back in 2003, so that's kind of fun.
I think Missy Elliott is very original and very good at what she does. And I think the big argument that keeps coming up, that we've seen time and time again is like, why are we crowbarring hip hop artists into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Why isn't there a hip hop Hall of Fame?
They should,
look at Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton, and Dolly Parton is a legend and writes her own songs and has an incredible life and story. And she's like once in a lifetime talent. And even she was like, I don't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
There's an easy fix though. All they need to do is change the name, call it the Music Hall of Fame, and you're good to go. You don't have these debates, right?
Right.
And finally, I got two more. We got 2 minutes, and I got two more names. Willie Nelson made it in. I think we were just talking about Dolly Parton. That's perfect. And George Michael. Yeah,
listen, I love George Michael.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the greatest singers of our generation. Actually, I have all of his solo albums.
I'm a fan. I like him.
By the way, a lot of people don't know that he played drums and bass guitar on a lot of his solo material. A lot of people
did not know
that. Like on the older record, came out in the early 90s. He played drums and electric bass on a lot of those songs, and people don't realize.
Yeah. Well, I just found out that Stevie Wonder played drums on all of his albums. How come I didn't know that? That's crazy. Anyway, we got 60 seconds left. I'm with Ice Age here. They just dropped their third album, Waves of Loss and Power, on Sensory Records. You can pick it up at Laser's Edge. Ken Golden does a great job running the shop down there. Any last thoughts, Doug?
I'm just couldn't be more happy and excited and really floored by the reaction.
Jimmy?
Yeah, the same. I think the fact that the fans were hungry for this over 20 years was just amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing response. I also like to thank you, Scott, for having us on. I mean, this is just awesome.
Thank you.
It was a great time. I had a
pleasure.
blast in the show. Your music knowledge is great. I mean, we are like connected in many levels, which is really good to see.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to be doing an album review here soon, so be looking for that on the channel. And awesome. Ice Age.